Hey there, I hope you're enjoying the series so far, and I hope you're ready for the next conversation I'm about to have. I have the pleasure of speaking with Saira today, and I've been following her work for a while, and I love the energy that she is putting out there, as well as the information and doses of motivation that she puts out there on social media to really help organizations and individuals thrive more in the workplace and really build healthier and safer work environments. But let me share her official bio with you. Saira is a workplace investigator, and she works with organizations to build healthier, safer, and more respectful workplaces by conducting independent workplace investigations and assessments that are fair, thorough, and thoughtful. She is also the creator of the Workplace Investigation Bootcamp, which is a step self-led online course for HR professionals to help them lead workplace investigations with ease, confidence, and the best possible outcomes. She also has an incredible background in HR, so you are going to pick up a lot of actionable tips on both the employee and employer side as well. I hope you enjoy this conversation. All right, let's get into it. All right, I am joined today by Saira, and I am so excited to have you here. I've been watching you on LinkedIn for a while, and I really admire the work that you do. So I really appreciate you agreeing to be a part of this series.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Yes, absolutely. And I would love it if you would just tell our listeners why you decided to say yes and share your story today.
So, I decided to say yes because not only am I a big fan of yours on LinkedIn, but the whole topic of your docu-series around toxic workplaces is, it's really a subject that is near and dear to my heart for two reasons. One, because I myself have survived a toxic work environment. And two, because the work that I do as a workplace investigator is directly tied to it. So it's the work that I'm most passionate about. And that's why I wanted to be part of this.
I love it. And I know we'll talk a little bit more about what you do later, but for now, I want to dive into some of your experience. Did you work in multiple toxic work environments, or was it one? And when is it that you realized, hey, this is a toxic work environment?
So for me, I spent a long period of my career journey in one organization. And so I really only had a toxic work experience working in one organization. And though I worked for that organization for more than 10 years, I
Wow.
really, yeah, even though I worked for that organization for more than 10 years, I would say that I only experienced a toxic work relationship with my boss for a period of 1 year. And I would
Okay.
say that, you know, it was kind of an interesting situation because I was an HR leader within the HR department of this organization.
Mm,
So, at first, it was more subtle acts of disrespect. So if we
mhm.
were meeting one on one, there would be, if I was speaking, they would interrupt me, or they would roll their eyes at a comment that I made, or they would dismiss my ideas or my opinions. But then slowly over time, it became more challenging and it became more demeaning because my manager was displaying these acts of behavior in front of other people.
Oh,
And it got to the point where it was actually really affecting my ability to perform and do my work. So, some of the things that were happening were, if I went to my manager for advice or for guidance on a situation that I was navigating, I was told that I needed to be more strategic or that I needed to work on my problem solving skills. If I
wow.
was giving a high level of service to a client, and so were all my other HR counterparts, I was accused of spoon feeding my clients while they were praised for delivering excellent service. And, there
Mm,
were all these sorts of things. And finally, it got to the point where I had been shut out of some meetings. And what that
mm.
meant was it impacted my ability to do my work, to serve my clients' needs, and to represent their interests at the strategic table. But I think there was one defining moment in my journey, and that was a day in 2013. And it was a dark day, right? It was a
Mm-hmm.
day that I myself had laid off 10 people, and I had supported my team in laying off and transitioning 29 other people. So 39 lives, livelihoods had been impacted that day.
Yes.
And, it was about 7 p.m. Everyone else had gone home, and I was taking a quiet moment in my office with the door closed to reflect on my day.
Mm-hmm.
And I let the emotions of the day wash over me. I
Mm-hmm.
really thought that I was alone, that it was a private moment, when my manager popped their head into my office. We made eye contact, and
Mm-hmm.
they said to me, "Big girls don't cry." They closed the door and they walked away. And I
Wow.
was literally like, I was dumbfounded. I was gobsmacked that in a vulnerable and quiet, private moment, that
Yes.
instead of offering, compassion or a kind word, my manager was quoting a Fergie song. It
Right.
was just so disheartening. And it was that moment that I realized that the relationship was not repairable. Trust could not be rebuilt. Respect could not be harnessed. And it was time for me to go. I did do all the right things. I was in HR. I knew my rights. I got
Mm-hmm.
loud to the right people. But I was told that I was in HR, that I needed to work it out for myself, and that I needed to stop being so sensitive and so emotional. And
Oh, gosh.
mhm,
There was so there's so much in the story that you just told. I have so many follow-up questions and there's
go
so
for
much I
it.
can't even get my thoughts together. So I guess I'll start off with number one, and this is just a statement. What a lack of emotional intelligence. And that is one of the things that leaders need to be trained on. But I'm curious with this specific leader, because you were at this organization for over 10 years. So was this something that just happened out of nowhere, or did you see the buildup to it in previous years? Was it a new manager? What did this relationship look like before all of this took place?
So it was a new relationship to me. There had been a little
Okay.
bit of a reorganization of the department. And so it was a new manager for me. Now
Okay.
I had heard, lots of really good things about this manager, and I agreed with a lot of them. They were
Mhm.
smart, they were savvy, they were strategic, and I felt lucky to be reporting to them because I thought I could learn something from them. But it quickly grew clear to me that
Mhm.
I was not a favorite, that I was going to have to work really hard to prove myself. And even though I demonstrated strong and what I consider to be, top level performance,
Yes.
it wasn't enough. And it wasn't just me who was experiencing this type of behavior, but I would say
Mm.
that when I spoke to my counterparts, I was the one who probably got it the worst for the longest.
Wow.
And that's not like, it's not a pity story. It's just that's the
Right.
reality of the situation. Yeah.
That's the facts, exactly. And with that HR background, you did speak up. And I'm just curious, who did you speak up to and what was the result of it?
So I spoke up to my manager's manager, who also happened to be the most senior HR leader in the organization.
Okay.
And
Did they show support?
I wouldn't call it support, no.
Mm.
But I what I will say is two different things. Is before I
Mhm.
went to senior leadership,
Mhm.
I was someone who felt like it was also my responsibility to go to my manager and say, obviously we have a relationship breakdown. Like, what can we do to repair this? What have I done, or what have I done that has um, affected our relationship? Can I make amends? Is there something that I can
Yes.
do? What is my part in this, and how can I work hard and demonstrate commitment to making things better? But I was, again, by my manager, I was told that I was being too soft, too sensitive, and too emotional. When I went to the higher ups, it was sort of the same story. They were busy. I understand there was a lot going on in the organization, but this was someone who had worked for the organization for almost 14 years. And
Okay.
I was asking for help for probably the first time in my tenure at that organization.
Right.
And they weren't just hearing complaints from me, they were hearing buzzings and, they were hearing it from other people as well.
And with that type of feedback that you got about being too sensitive, was there ever a time where you believed that you were being too sensitive and you started to blame yourself? Or did you know, hey, no, this is how I feel, my feelings are valid? What was going through your mind during that time?
I think at the beginning, a lot of it was I was questioning myself. Nobody was questioning themselves more than I was, right? Nobody was
Mhm.
wondering, how did it get so bad? And some of it I thought was probably in my mind, and maybe I was being
Mhm.
too sensitive or too emotional. But, it's that cumulative build on effect. It's
Yeah.
day in and day out, every interaction you have that feeling in the pit of your stomach, or your palms
Mhm.
start to sweat even before they've said anything. You know that there's toxicity, and you know that you're not
Yes.
imagining it. So I think nobody questioned themselves more than I did, but it became
Mhm.
clear to me over time that this was not something that lived in my head. This was real. I would see it in the pitying looks that I got from other people when I would be publicly humiliated or demeaned in meetings. My
Mhm.
clients were even told, that from a performance perspective, I was on my last leg. And they even wrote
Wow.
letters to our leadership saying,
Mhm.
she's the best HR we've had.
Mhm.
I don't know what's going on, but her performance isn't bad. So what we're being told is not the truth. So I don't know. There were so many layers to it. I
There
think
always
even
is.
Yeah, and even after I left, I was left to wonder, like, was this as bad as I thought it was, right?
Mhm.
And it's so weird. I think it was about 2 years ago now. A former colleague of mine sent me uh, a newspaper article. And at
Mhm.
first I thought it was about a leader who was placed on leave about workplace allegations, pending
Oh.
an investigation. And so at first I thought, okay, it's a news article related to the work that I do, but it wasn't. When I read through the article, the name
Mhm.
of the former manager jumped out at me, and
Really?
yeah, it literally stopped me in my tracks. And the article said that, you know, an independent investigator had determined that this
Mhm.
manager had psychologically harassed most of the employees in the HR department.
Wow.
Some employees described their experience as, what was the word that they used? Um, Not just disheartening, it was disturbing. And others
Wow.
others described it as inhumane, like their working conditions were inhumane. And part of me was shocked, right? Because it had been 8 years, and this manager had just moved on to other organizations, was playing the same game, but just against the
Right.
backdrop of more senior job titles, right? But then part of me was not surprised, right? Because
Mhm.
there was never any accountability. There was never any remorse when I would point out situations where I felt disrespected or mistreated or humiliated or demeaned. And
Mhm.
there has to be that self-awareness and that want to change, because that's how this vicious cycle changes, right? People have to show
Yes,
up and do that confronting work.
exactly. And you touched on accountability. And I'm curious, I'd love to hear your opinion on this. Why do you think companies struggle with accountability or addressing the issue whenever it's brought to their attention?
I think sometimes it really is, they don't know what they don't know. They don't know how to deal with these things fairly, ethically, swiftly.
Yes.
And so sometimes accountability sits because they don't know what to do.
Mhm.
Sometimes in other situations,
Mhm.
they have a leader who they perceive to be a strong leader of a strong team that gets performance, that gets results, that brings in the money. And
Right.
so they would prioritize this toxic rock star over
Mhm.
the health, wellness, and safety of employees. I
Ah,
think,
yeah.
again, it's not a simple A to B. It's very layered. It's complex. It shouldn't be so layered and complex, but it is.
Right. It is. That is so true. And looking back on your experience with that organization, is there anything you would have done differently when addressing the issue?
Um, yeah, I think that's a really good question. I don't know that there's much that I could have done differently, but I think that for my own mental health, my own
Mhm.
wellness, I don't think I would have stayed for so long. I think
Yes.
that I would have prioritized my mental health, my well-being. I would have
Mhm.
chosen to get out sooner. Um, you know, yeah, I think I would have just chosen to leave sooner. And I know that that sounds like a very sad end to a story, but um, yeah, it took me so long to recover from that experience, right? Like my self-confidence was so diminished. My sense
Mhm.
of self was like decimated, and my self-belief, like it was destroyed. So I think if I had left sooner,
Mhm.
um, it would have allowed me to process and recover sooner than going through all of those painful days and experiences and moments.
Yes. And thank you for saying that and being honest about it. And I think that people also need to hear this because I'm sure a lot of people will nod their head and agree with you. But I'm curious, number one, when you were there, what were you prioritizing above your mental and emotional health? And yeah, I guess what were you prioritizing and how long did it take you to recover from that toxic environment?
So what I was prioritizing were a couple of different things. One is I really loved my clients. Like I loved working with them.
Okay.
I had so much challenging work and stretch assignments, and I was
Mhm.
having so much opportunity to develop new skills.
Mhm.
And so I didn't want to walk away from my clients. I also didn't want to
Mhm.
walk away from an organization where I had devoted so many years of service, where I had grown so much. Like I'd pretty much grown up in
Mm.
this organization. And it
Mhm.
was not a one-sided relationship. I only stayed as long as I did because it provided me with an excellent employee experience for many, many, many years. I learned so much. I had access to some of the best mentors. Some of the people that are closest to me in my life today,
Mhm.
I worked with them there. Um,
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah, I had so much good in that organization and so many good years and good moments and times where they really supported me and really had my back. In some of the darker, more personal things that I went through, I lost my mom,
Mm.
and they were very supportive during that time. And I, to this day, I can't thank them enough for providing that level of foundation and support in a time where I needed it most. It wasn't there towards the end, and that's okay. I hope that
Mhm.
they've learned and that they've made different choices and that they've grown from that experience.
I hope so. And once you left, how long did it take you to get your confidence and motivation and inner self-worth back?
I don't know that it ever came back in exactly the same way.
Mm. Okay.
But I would say It was something I was slowly processing for, I would say, close to 3 years. It's not to say that
Really?
it's not to say that I wasn't able to function or I wasn't able to be
Mhm.
functioning well. I
Right.
just mean that there were still so many moments where I would always think back to that time.
Mhm. And did you seek out additional support? Did you dive into self-care? Like, how did you actively work on regaining all of that within that 3-year period?
So I did like have some close people in my life that I spoke with. I was
Mhm.
seeing a psychologist and I found that to be
Good.
really, really helpful. But I also kind
Mhm.
of felt like I had to work on my own
Mhm.
reprogramming what I had been told, right? Because my self-confidence, my self-belief, everything was in the
Mhm.
toilet. And I had to work hard to remind myself that I was good, that I did good work, that I
Yes.
made great impacts. And so some of the stories that I had been told about myself, I just had to kind of confront and realize that they weren't true. And that took a little bit of time.
I bet. But I'm so glad you're on the other side of
Yeah,
it. And
same.
yes, based on your smile today, tell me, how is life these days?
It's great. I have the best boss ever because I report to myself. No, I'm kidding.
There you go.
Um, I work for myself. I'm doing work that lights me up every day. I know that I'm making a huge and positive impact, and I'm achieving my mission every day towards making, workplaces healthier, safer, and more respectful. And I really
I
don't
love that.
believe that, I really don't believe that if I hadn't traveled that path, I'm not sure
Mhm.
I would have ended up here. And even if I did end up here, I'm not sure I would be as passionate and as committed to the work that I do if that hadn't happened to me.
Yes, and everything always works out for the greater good. So I love that it's influencing the work that you do today. And speaking of the work you do today, you
Yeah,
touched on it a little bit, but I'd love to hear more with exactly how you help professionals and companies. So I'll let you take it over.
sure. So I am an independent licensed workplace investigator. So what that means is that companies who have received complaints or allegations of
Mhm.
discrimination, harassment, violence, threats of violence, misconduct, or a toxic work
Mhm.
environment, they hire me to investigate the complaint, to write a report, and to provide thoughtful recommendations as to how they can restore the workplace and prevent a
Mhm.
situation like that from happening again.
I love that. And that is so needed. And for the people who are watching and listening to this, I will definitely leave Saira's information below for you to reach out to her individually so that she can help your organization thrive. And before we wrap up, do you have any last words of wisdom or advice for the professional who's currently working in a toxic work environment?
You know, the only advice I can really give for someone who's navigating a toxic workplace is it's kind of 3 steps. Know your rights, know where your
Mm,
organization stands on these issues. What do your policies say? Do your policies mean anything? When leaders have been confronted with issues related to disrespect before, what actions have been taken? So, really work
mhm,
hard to know your rights. The second piece of advice I give is to get loud to the right people, right? Find the helpers, go to a leader that you know, like, and respect, and let them know
mhm.
what's going on. If you have good relationships with your HR department, go to your HR department and ask for help in navigating this situation. Document everything. Make sure that you've documented everything to the most senior person that you can access and do it in writing because sometimes senior leaders don't know until they know. And if you've done all those things, you've done all the right things, and you've been dismissed or your concerns have not been acted swiftly upon, then shame on them. And at that point in time, my third piece of advice is to choose sooner. Choose to leave sooner. Choose yourself sooner. Choose to start over sooner. There is life beyond this workplace. And I don't encourage people to stay and wait it out unless they're in a situation where they just cannot leave, right? I understand
Right.
that leaving organizations can be a privilege. Some people rely heavily on their benefits and their pensions. Some
Yes.
people live in remote areas where that is their only viable place of employment. Some people have personal stressors that I could never even imagine. So it's not lost on me that it can be very privileged advice to say to choose sooner and to leave sooner. But if it's something that is accessible to you, then I encourage you to do it, because sitting in that environment, working in that environment, it just strips you of everything. And we're better than that. We deserve more than that. We are enough, and we need to find our next place of employment that deserves us.
Oh, that was amazing. Beautifully said. Thank you so much for joining us here today and sharing your experience and giving that dose of encouragement. Really appreciate having you. And I will leave Saira's contact information in the description box below. So if you want to reach out to her and work one on one or bring her into your company, you will be able to do that. Thank you so much again for a wonderful conversation.
Thank you so much for having me, and have a wonderful day.
Absolutely. Thank you. Hey there. Thanks for watching. I hope you picked up a lot of helpful tips and inspiration and motivation from Saira during our conversation. I am so grateful to have these talks with professionals from a variety of different backgrounds and expertise. I absolutely love Saira's background in HR, and she really walked us through the steps that she took, things that she would have did differently, and what companies need to do in order to build healthier and safer work environments. If you want to contact Saira on your own, please feel free to. I will leave her contact information below. And finally, I love where we left it with putting yourself first and taking care of you. I hope that message is clear to you, and I hope you really take it under consideration as you continue throughout your career journey. Thank you for watching.